Instructor Carl Arps from Fox Valley Tech is glad that his students know the difference between practice and the real thing. For those of you who didn't see the story in the Post-Crescent or the many places it got picked up in national and international media, I even found an interview that Carl Arps did with the Canadian Broadcasting Company. You see, Carl Arps is lucky to be alive. He's an instructor in the EMT program at Fox Valley Tech and was helping lead students through an exercise in how to respond to cardiac arrests. Carl was playing the part of a person having a heart attack. And then halfway through the exercise, Carl began to have a heart attack. A real one. Carl Arps is really glad that his students know the difference between practice and the real deal. And when you read their accounts, both the students and the other instructor and Carl's own account of what happened, there is the moment where no one can quite tell what's going on, and the students bring the other instructor over to sort of shake him out of it, to say, like, your acting is too good, Carl. And that's when it became clear that he was, in fact, having a cardiac arrest. And so his students did what they both knew and were still learning how to do, to call 911, to perform compressions, to charge up the AED. And this story has a happy ending, right? You're like, he gave an interview to the CBC. Carl lives, to be clear. He had bypass surgery and lived. As I read that news story, I had one returning over and over and over in my mind. How do you tell the difference between a dry run and the real thing? Growing up Unitarian Universalist and celebrating flower communion or flower ceremony or flower celebration, it goes by several names and we cannot seem to commit. It's very us of us. All right, growing up UU and celebrating flower communion, it, for me, was an annual opportunity to reflect on the history of Norbert Čapek, who, the very short version, for those of you who weren't here last Sunday for Reverend Christina's sermon, Norbert Čapek was a Czech Unitarian minister whose ministry in the 1930s emphasized the beauty of human diversity in the face of the Nazi regime. Flower communion was my annual opportunity to wonder, how would I respond if an authoritarian government hostile to my values posed a violent threat to my community? And this year, as we prepare to mark flower communion in a couple of weeks on Sunday, May 31st, this year it feels less and less like a dry run. Less and less like a commemoration of some distant past, some other fascists, and more like a statement that lives in the here and the now. Right? Our theology, our religious conviction, holds that human beings are meant to celebrate our inherent diversity, and that it is, in fact, against our religion to participate in systems that create a stratification or hierarchies of human worth. As I've been pondering, I've wondered, was this true last year too? And I've been reaching back in my mind to try to figure out at what point did the commemoration of flower communion start feeling like the real deal instead of a practice run? At what point did I realize that Carl was not acting? I wonder, was it earlier this year as we watched ICE agents abduct people in broad daylight in the Twin Cities and other places? Was it last year when major hospital systems began shutting down gender-affirming care for minors? Or was it in 2022 when the Dobbs decision overturned Roe versus Wade? Or was it when the Biden administration tightened asylum rules and made it infinitely harder for people seeking safety here? Oh man, or was it the first Trump administration? Remember that? When they enacted the Muslim ban and people occupied airports? Was it the summer of 2015 when I was still living in Baltimore and yet another unarmed young black man was killed by police? When did it stop being a remembrance of someone else's problems and start being about how we face those here and now? When did it stop being a dry run and become the real deal? Maybe you have your own litany of those moments that, with the gift of hindsight, seem so clearly to pave a path to the moment we are in today, where somehow all at once we're responding to casual cruelty against our trans kin, the cataclysmic rollback of voting rights for Black Americans, the persistent abductions, though they get less news time now, they are still happening, of any neighbors who sort of happen to look like they might be immigrants. And at some point in the litany, I don't know about you, I suddenly realized that I'm no longer engaged in a theoretical exercise about what I might do if. Instead, I'm here with you all, trying to figure out how to have an annual giving campaign for the fellowship to keep our lights on and our staff paid, and move as much money as humanly possible to neighbors at risk of deportation. I'm trying to figure out how to write an annual budget and create alternative systems of care for queer people. I'm trying to figure out how to protect my own family and also somehow make dinner tonight. You have to make it every night, especially when you have kids. What? Right? I am here trying to navigate my own flawed humanity and that of my fellow activists, and also somehow remember to empty the dehumidifier so that mold does not grow in the basement. And as I think through this litany of the many places we find ourselves in this moment, I reflect on the ways that this tension has been true for many years, for generations, for hundreds of years sometimes, for people who have had to figure out how to live through a cataclysm and still make it day to day. Ancestors who lived through the AIDS crisis, through the civil rights movement, ancestors who have been persisting through enormous crisis, and for whom the question of how would you respond if there was an existential threat is not a theoretical exercise, but a lived one, a real one. And when I think about it that way, I wonder, maybe rituals, and I mean that in both capital R rituals, the things we do like light the chalice, have flower celebration, water mingling, and lowercase r rituals that make up our community, because this is a time for a confession. You don't have to raise your hand. I can see into your very hearts. How many of you have a pattern you follow every time you come into the building? Yeah, you're like, I come in the door, and then I go to the coat closet, and then I get my coffee, and then I look for this person. That's a ritual that makes up community. Maybe these rituals, these practices, were not meant to be commemorations of something long past and gone. Rituals were not meant to help us remember something that we are disconnected from. Maybe rituals are meant to be time travel. It's okay. Maybe rituals are meant to be time travel. They're meant to transport us to the past, to the places of hurt and beauty and wonder and grief that generations of humanity have lived through. Right? They're time travel to the past. They meet us in those tender places of memory that live still in our very bodies. And maybe rituals are meant to transport us into the future, to the possibilities we are still learning to imagine, and to teach us what that possible world looks and feels and smells like. Think about good funerals, because not bad funerals. You've all been to, how many of you have been to a bad funeral? My God, it's like criminal when they're really bad. Right. That it connects us to the past. It takes us into our memories of our loved one, to who the person was and the life they lived and the lineage they come from. But a good memorial service also takes us into the future and shows us that however raw our grief is, it will not always feel that raw. It's time travel in both directions. And so as we consider the legacy of Norbert Chapek, the ritual he created that we have inherited as Unitarian Universalists today, I wonder, how can our practices, our rituals, the things that make up our community, how can they make us ready for this moment? And the video we watched today during the Time for All Ages, though perhaps you think to yourself, I am not learning any more skills like that. Don't teach me how to play the violin or throw a baseball, Hannah. Like, I'm done learning new skills like that. You're not. Never. Thank you, Beth. You're never done learning. And in fact, those practices about how to approach taking something from a theoretical skill and deepening it, putting it into our muscle memory, that applies to how we approach building a different world, too. Man, and that first one is focus. Did anyone feel personally called out about the distractions? Not me. Right, but our attention and our presence to what matters is enormously important right now. In a world where it is increasingly difficult to figure out what is real and what is AI generated, how we spend our attention and how we tune it to discerning the truth is deeply important, and that the practices we do together to build for a better world, to resist this authoritarian moment in which we find ourselves, they require our focus. So we got to focus. And the second piece from the video that I want to lift up is that we have to get the form right first. You watched in the video the boxer go from a slow, deliberate movement and not speed up until they had the form correct. And in this context, I would offer that if you have never in your life conscientiously disobeyed an unjust rule or law, that if you, in your mind, you're like, I'm going to start with, like, overthrowing the government. That's where I'm going to begin. No. You're going to start small. You're going to start small. We're going to start in those micro ways that we stand in our truth and do what is right and just, regardless of what the law says. And so I invite just like to start small. rather than believing that you're like, suddenly I am the revolution itself, even though I have never so much as like parked without plugging the meter. So we're going to start small. We're going to get the form right first. And that will not always feel glamorous or exciting, but it will build the movement we need. We're going to work hard, but we're not going to burn out. You saw in the video that even elite performers cannot practice their craft all day nonstop. We need breaks, we need rests, we need moments of care. And finally, we are going to imagine the future we want. My favorite part of the video was the very end, where they talked about how once you've got the basic skill, it's almost as effective to imagine yourself doing it as it is to do it in practice. Right? Our time spent envisioning a different world through art and music and stories, it's not a distraction. Right? It's an act of imagination, of practicing what is possible. When we collapse space and time in ritual, we learn what we are capable of. We learn that the loving divine that gave Norbert Chopik the courage to stand by his beliefs all the way until his death at Dachau still dwells among us here today. We learn that past grief still touches us. We learn that the way this chapter we are living through today, the way that it ends, it doesn't have to be disaster. That we can practice our way into a different future. 2 weeks from now, as we all bring our flowers to share and behold the astonishing beauty when we line them up together on a table, and then receive the gift of a flower to take with us, we will be practicing what it takes to build a community flourishing in beauty and diversity. We will be traveling to a past where our brave ancestors showed us what it means to fight for each other. We'll be traveling to the future where all are free. And it will not be a drill. It will be the real deal. May it be so. Amen.